Democrats want to impeach. Today, Democrat Al Green, not the soul singer, announced he's introducing articles of impeachment against Donald J. Trump because he said he wants to turn the Gaza Strip into Gaza-Lago. Democrats were already losing their minds after Musk froze their foreign aid slush fund.
We will not shut up. We will stand up. We will speak up. We will rise up. What's dangerous is that people who work for USAID are wearing masks to protect themselves from Musk.
Stop everything because Washington just exploded. A federal judge unsealed explosive case files that directly implicate President Trump in financial misconduct and directives related to January 6th. And within hours, literally hours, members of Congress from both parties started publicly demanding Trump's resignation. We're not just talking about Democrats who've been calling for Trump's removal since day one. We're talking about Republicans. GOP senators and representatives are now saying Trump needs to resign or face immediate impeachment and arrest. This is unprecedented. This is a sitting president facing bipartisan calls for removal based on newly revealed evidence that a federal judge just made public. And the contents of these files are apparently so damning that even Trump's allies in Congress can't defend him anymore. The political earthquake we're witnessing right now could reshape American politics for generations. Because when members of your own party turn against you and demand resignation, that's not politics as usual. That's a president in complete freefall with nowhere left to turn. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video. Let me break down what just happened. Judge Marianne Keller unsealed case files in a legal proceeding involving Trump. The files contain private communications between Trump's team and congressional staff. They include financial records showing transactions that don't add up and can't be explained. And most explosively, they contain transcripts and documents pointing to illegal orders Trump allegedly gave about Capitol security around January 6. This isn't speculation or conspiracy theories. These are official court documents that a federal judge reviewed and decided the public has a right to see. And what they reveal is apparently so serious that it's triggering calls for Trump's arrest from members of his own party. The documents lay bare a pattern of conduct that legal experts are calling indefensible, showing not just mistakes or poor judgment, but what appears to be deliberate criminal activity orchestrated from the highest levels of government. When you read through the summaries of what's in these files, the scope of potential wrongdoing is staggering and the evidence appears overwhelming. The bipartisan nature of the response is what makes this so shocking. Representative Jamie Raskin, who led Trump's second impeachment, immediately tweeted that if there's criminality here, the Department of Justice can't sit on their hands. That's expected from Raskin. But then Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski issued a statement saying the American people deserve the truth, no matter how high this goes. Murkowski is a moderate Republican, but she's still a Republican, and she's calling for accountability. That means the evidence in these files must be overwhelming, because Republicans don't turn on Trump lightly. His base is powerful, primary challenges are real, but apparently what's in these unsealed files is so bad that even the political risks of breaking with Trump are worth taking. When you see Republicans publicly stating that accountability needs to happen regardless of party loyalty, you know the evidence must be absolutely devastating. The kind of proof that makes political calculations irrelevant because defending the indefensible becomes impossible. Legal experts who've reviewed the unsealed documents are saying resignation is Trump's only way out, that the evidence of financial misconduct and illegal directives is clear enough that criminal prosecution is almost certain, and that Trump's best move, maybe his only move, is to resign before the Department of Justice moves to indict him. Because once indictments come down, resignation doesn't protect you from prosecution. But resigning before charges are filed might give Trump some leverage to negotiate, to maybe avoid the most serious charges in exchange for leaving office. That's what legal analysts are saying publicly, and you know behind the scenes, Trump's lawyers are probably having those exact conversations with him right now. They're likely explaining that fighting this in court would mean years of trials, potentially losing everything, and possibly ending up in prison, whereas resignation might offer a path to some kind of negotiated resolution that avoids the worst outcomes. The judge didn't just unseal the files. Judge Keller also imposed serious penalties and consequences. There are contempt referrals against Trump and members of his team for not complying with previous court orders. There are asset freezes to prevent Trump from moving money or hiding evidence. There are fraud penalties and warnings that if Trump doesn't comply with court directives going forward, arrest warrants could be issued. This judge is not messing around. She's treating this like the serious legal matter it is, and she's using every tool at her disposal to force compliance and accountability. The combination of unsealing evidence, imposing financial penalties, freezing assets, and threatening arrests creates a comprehensive legal trap that makes it nearly impossible for Trump to maneuver his way out. Every escape route has been systematically closed off by judicial action. The Department of Justice is now under massive pressure to act. When a federal judge unseals evidence of potential crimes and Congress from both parties is demanding action, the DOJ can't just ignore it. They have to investigate. They have to evaluate whether charges are warranted. And given that the evidence is apparently clear enough to trigger bipartisan calls for Trump's resignation, it's hard to imagine the DOJ won't move forward with some kind of prosecution. The political implications are staggering. If Trump resigns, who becomes president? The line of succession means the vice president takes over. But that creates its own chaos and questions about legitimacy and transitions of power. If Trump doesn't resign and Congress moves to impeach, we're looking at another impeachment trial, but this time with Republican support, which means it might actually result in removal from office. And if the DOJ moves to indict Trump while he's still president, we're in completely uncharted constitutional territory about whether a sitting president can be criminally prosecuted. Trump's response is going to be critical. Does he fight this? Does he claim the unsealed files are fake or taken out of context? Does he attack the judge and Congress and the DOJ as part of some conspiracy? Or does he recognize that the walls are closing in and start exploring resignation or plea deals? The next few days are going to determine Trump's fate. Let's break down what's in these files and why they're so explosive. All right, let's dig into the specifics of what these unsealed judge files actually contain, because the details matter enormously.
And we're learning new details this morning in the case charging Trump with plotting to overturn the 2020 election.
A federal judge has unsealed a 165-page filing from special counsel Jack Smith. He argues Trump's actions were not the official acts of a president, which are protected by the recent Supreme Court ruling on immunity.
First, there are the financial records. According to reports from people who've reviewed the documents, Judge Keller unsealed bank statements, wire transfer records, and financial disclosures that show Trump and his organizations receiving large sums of money that weren't properly disclosed or explained. We're talking about millions of dollars in transactions that don't appear on tax returns or financial disclosure forms that Trump was legally required to file. Some of these transactions apparently occurred while Trump was president. Others happened before he took office, but were never properly disclosed during his campaigns or presidency. The pattern that emerges from these financial records is one of systematic concealment, money flowing through multiple accounts and shell companies in ways that seem specifically designed to avoid detection and reporting requirements that apply to everyone else. The financial misconduct allegations aren't just about failing to disclose income. The unsealed files apparently show Trump used shell companies and intermediaries to hide the source and destination of funds. That's not just tax evasion, though it's probably that too. That's potential money laundering. That's structuring transactions to avoid reporting requirements. Those are serious federal crimes that carry significant prison time. And the fact that a federal judge unsealed these records means she believed there was sufficient evidence of wrongdoing that the public interest in disclosure outweighed Trump's privacy interests. Judges don't unseal financial records lightly. The evidence must be substantial. When you look at the complexity of the financial arrangements described in these documents, it becomes clear this wasn't accidental or the result of sloppy bookkeeping. This was sophisticated financial engineering designed to hide money trails and avoid legal obligations that every other American has to follow. The January 6th related material is even more explosive. According to reports, the unsealed files include communications between Trump's team and congressional staff in the days and weeks leading up to January 6th. These communications apparently discuss Capitol security arrangements, and they suggest Trump or people acting on his behalf gave directives about reducing security or changing security protocols in ways that made the Capitol more vulnerable to the attack that eventually happened. If that's accurate, if Trump or his team deliberately weakened Capitol security, knowing there would be protests and potential violence, that's conspiracy to obstruct Congress. That's potentially sedition. Those are among the most serious crimes you can commit against the government. The deliberate nature of these security changes, if proven, transforms January 6th from a spontaneous riot that got out of hand into a planned attack that was facilitated from inside the government itself, and that's a level of criminal conduct that would be almost unprecedented in American history. The transcripts mentioned in reports are particularly damning. These appear to be either recordings of conversations or detailed notes from meetings where Trump discussed January 6 plans with advisors and congressional allies. The transcripts reportedly showed Trump was aware that violence was likely, that he understood some of his supporters were prepared to use force, and that he made decisions about his own actions and about security arrangements with full knowledge of these risks. That level of awareness and intentionality transforms Trump's conduct from potentially reckless to potentially criminal, because if he knew violence was coming and he took actions that facilitated or encouraged it, that's not protected political speech anymore. That's criminal conduct. The transcripts apparently captured Trump in his own words, acknowledging the potential for violence, discussing how to maximize the pressure on Congress, and making strategic decisions about his role in the day's events, all while understanding that people might get hurt and democratic processes might be disrupted through force. Judge Marianne Keller's role in all this deserves attention. She's the federal judge overseeing whatever case these files are part of, and she made the decision to unseal them despite objections from Trump's legal team, and possibly from government lawyers who argued for keeping some information confidential. For a judge to override those objections and make the files public, she must have concluded that the evidence of wrongdoing was clear and that public disclosure served important interests. Judges balance privacy concerns, national security issues, and ongoing investigation needs against transparency and accountability. Judge Keller apparently decided accountability won. Her written order, unsealing these documents, reportedly runs to dozens of pages and methodically explains why each piece of evidence needs to be public, why the American people have a right to know what their president allegedly did, and why keeping this information secret would itself constitute a miscarriage of justice. The contempt referrals Judge Keller issued are significant. When a judge holds someone in contempt, it means they violated a court order. The fact that Trump and members of his team are facing contempt charges suggests they've been refusing to comply with previous orders to produce documents or testify or cooperate in some way. Contempt can result in fines and even jail time, and judges take it seriously because the entire legal system depends on people following court orders. If Trump has been defying Judge Keller's orders, that's both a separate crime and evidence of consciousness of guilt that he knows he has something to hide. The pattern of noncompliance documented in the court record shows repeated refusals to turn over materials, missed deadlines, incomplete productions, and what the judge characterized as deliberate obstruction of the judicial process. The asset freezes are a powerful tool. When a judge freezes someone's assets, it prevents them from selling property, transferring money, or hiding resources that might be needed to pay fines or restitution later. Asset freezes are typically used when there's evidence someone might try to dissipate assets to avoid paying judgments. The fact that Judge Keller imposed asset freezes on Trump suggests she believes there's a real risk he would try to move money or hide it if given the chance. That's not something judges do lightly. It requires evidence of intent to evade financial accountability. The specific assets frozen reportedly include real estate holdings, business accounts, and investment portfolios, basically preventing Trump from liquidating or transferring anything of significant value. The bipartisan congressional response reveals how serious this situation is. When Republicans start calling for Trump's resignation or accountability, that's a major shift. Lisa Murkowski is a moderate Republican from Alaska who's been willing to criticize Trump before, but even she usually stops short of calling for his removal. The fact that she's now saying the American people deserve the truth, no matter how high this goes, suggests the evidence in the unsealed files convinced her that defending Trump is no longer politically or morally defensible. And if Murkowski feels that way, other moderate Republicans probably do too. Behind the scenes, reports suggest that Republican senators are holding private meetings to discuss how to handle the Trump situation, whether to wait and see or to get ahead of the crisis by publicly breaking with him now. Jamie Raskin's response represents the Democratic position. As someone who led impeachment efforts against Trump, Raskin has been consistent in believing Trump should be held accountable. But his specific language, that the DOJ can't sit on their hands if there's criminality, is aimed at pushing Attorney General Merrick Garland to act. There's been frustration among some Democrats that the DOJ has been too cautious about investigating Trump. Raskin is essentially saying the unsealed files remove any excuse for inaction. The evidence is public now. The DOJ has to respond. Democrats are organizing oversight hearings, preparing subpoenas, and coordinating with state attorneys general who might bring their own charges if federal prosecutors hesitate. The legal expert consensus that resignation is Trump's only way out is telling. When lawyers who've reviewed the evidence all reach the same conclusion, that usually means the case against Trump is strong. Legal experts disagree all the time about prosecution chances and defense strategies, but if there's widespread agreement that Trump's best option is resignation, that suggests the evidence is overwhelming and defenses are weak. Multiple former prosecutors interviewed about the unsealed files have said the same thing, that if these documents are authentic and accurately represent what happened, then Trump faces criminal liability that would be very difficult to overcome at trial. The coordination allegations are also significant. If the unsealed files show Trump's team coordinating with congressional staff about security arrangements or about the events of January 6th, that suggests a broader conspiracy. It's not just Trump acting alone, it's a coordinated effort involving multiple people and possibly multiple offices. That makes prosecution easier because you can flip lower-level conspirators and get them to testify against higher-ups. The documents apparently name specific congressional staffers and White House officials who were involved in planning meetings and communications about January 6th, creating potential witnesses who might cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for leniency. Okay, let's break down what this actually means going forward, because these unsealed files and the congressional response have immediate and long-term consequences. First, the Department of Justice has to decide whether to indict Trump. That decision probably comes down to Attorney General Merrick Garland. And Garland has been cautious about prosecuting Trump, partly because he doesn't want the DOJ to look political. But when a federal judge unseals evidence and Congress from both parties demands action, it becomes much harder to justify inaction. The political cover for prosecution now exists in a way it didn't before, so DOJ indictments are increasingly likely. Garland is reportedly meeting with senior prosecutors and reviewing the unsealed materials to determine what charges might be appropriate and what the timeline for prosecution might look like. Second, Trump has to decide whether to fight or resign. Fighting means enduring criminal prosecution, potential conviction, and possible prison time. It means dominating news cycles with scandal instead of policy. It means his presidency being consumed by legal battles. Resigning means admitting defeat but potentially avoiding the worst consequences. It might allow him to negotiate the terms of his departure and maybe avoid prosecution on the most serious charges. That's a brutal choice, but it's the choice Trump now faces. His lawyers are likely presenting him with scenarios: what happens if he fights and loses versus what kind of deal he might be able to negotiate if he resigns voluntarily. Third, Congress has to decide whether to move forward with impeachment. If Trump doesn't resign and the DOJ is slow to indict, Congress might conclude they need to act. Impeachment proceedings could begin quickly, given that there's now bipartisan support. And unlike Trump's previous impeachments, this one might actually result in conviction and removal because Republicans are willing to vote for it. That would be historic. The first president actually removed through impeachment. House committees are already drafting articles of impeachment based on the evidence in the unsealed files, holding preliminary meetings to count votes, and preparing for rapid floor action if Trump doesn't resign within days. Fourth, Republicans have to figure out their position. Do they defend Trump and risk being associated with criminality? Or do they break with him and risk primary challenges from his base? Individual Republicans will make different calculations based on their districts and their principles. But collectively, the Republican Party is facing a moment of truth about whether they're Trump's party or whether they're willing to hold him accountable when evidence of crimes emerges. The internal Republican debate is reportedly intense, with establishment figures arguing that the party needs to distance itself from Trump to survive long term. Fifth, the 2026 midterm calculations just got scrambled. If Trump resigns or is removed, Republicans might actually benefit politically by distancing themselves from his scandals. But if Trump fights and stays in office while facing criminal charges, Republicans will have to run while defending or explaining away a president under indictment. That's a terrible political position. Democrats will hammer every Republican candidate with Trump's legal problems, and it could cost Republican seats in competitive districts. Now let's talk about what you should watch for in the coming days and weeks. First, Trump's response. Does he give a speech or statement addressing the unsealed files? Does he attack Judge Keller? Does he claim innocence? Or does he stay quiet while his lawyers explore options? His response will tell us whether he's planning to fight or considering resignation. Watch for any signs that Trump is preparing to leave office, canceling events, having unusual meetings with lawyers and advisors, or making arrangements that suggest he's thinking about life after the presidency. Second, DOJ statements or actions. Does Attorney General Garland comment on the unsealed files? Does the DOJ announce new investigations or grand jury proceedings? Any signal from DOJ about their intentions will be huge news and will shape how everyone else reacts. Watch for leaks from inside the Justice Department about internal debates over charging decisions or for announcements about impaneling grand juries. Third, congressional hearings. Democrats will probably hold hearings to examine the evidence in the unsealed files. They'll call witnesses. They'll demand more documents. Watch what comes out of those hearings because it will either strengthen or weaken the case against Trump. Look for whether Republicans participate constructively in these hearings or boycott them. Their level of engagement will signal how seriously they're taking the evidence. Fourth, Republican positioning. Watch which Republicans defend Trump and which call for accountability. Watch whether Senate Majority Leader and House Speaker comment. Their positions will influence how the rest of the caucus responds. Pay attention to Republicans from competitive districts and swing states. They're the ones most likely to break with Trump because they have the most to lose politically. Fifth, Trump's legal team. Watch for lawyer changes. If Trump's current lawyers think the case is unwinnable, they might quit. New lawyers coming in would signal Trump is preparing for criminal trial. And who those lawyers are will tell you what defense strategy Trump is considering. Are they white-collar crime specialists? Are they constitutional lawyers? The composition of Trump's legal team will reveal a lot about how he plans to fight. Sixth, polling and public opinion. Watch whether Trump's approval ratings collapse in response to the unsealed files. Watch whether Republican voters stick with him or start turning against him. Public opinion will influence whether Republicans in Congress feel safe breaking with Trump. Look for polling in key swing states and districts. If Trump's numbers crater there, it gives Republicans political cover to abandon him. The constitutional and institutional stakes are enormous. If a president can be forced to resign or be removed from office because of criminal evidence, that sets a precedent for accountability. It shows that presidents are subject to law, but it also creates risks of political prosecutions or weaponization of the legal system. The balance between accountability and stability is delicate, and how this Trump situation resolves will affect that balance for future presidents. Legal scholars are already writing about this moment as potentially defining the outer limits of presidential power and establishing new norms about when and how presidents can be held criminally accountable. The historical significance is clear. If Trump becomes the first president forced to resign due to criminal prosecution, that reshapes American political history. It affects how we think about presidential power and accountability. It influences whether future presidents feel constrained by law or whether they think they can act with impunity. This is a defining moment. Historians will study this period for generations, analyzing the documents that were unsealed, the decisions made by key actors, and the ultimate resolution. Here's my take on what this means. Trump finally went too far. The financial misconduct and January 6 directives crossed lines that even his allies can't defend. A federal judge recognized that and unsealed the evidence. Congress from both parties recognized that and demanded accountability. And Trump now faces a choice between resignation and criminal prosecution. Neither is good for him personally, but for American democracy, having a system that can hold even presidents accountable when evidence of crimes emerges is crucial. This is that system being tested, and so far, it seems to be working. The Trump era has been defined by norm-breaking and testing institutional limits, but institutions appear to be holding. Courts are enforcing orders. Judges are demanding compliance. Congress is reasserting authority, and the DOJ is under pressure to act. That's not partisan politics. That's the system doing what it's designed to do, providing checks and balances that prevent any one person from being above the law. Whether Trump resigns, is removed, or is prosecuted, the principle that presidents can be held accountable will be strengthened. So what's the bottom line? A federal judge unsealed case files implicating Trump in financial misconduct and illegal January 6 directives. Congress, from both parties, immediately demanded Trump's resignation or impeachment. The files contain private communications, unexplained financial transactions, and transcripts showing Trump's awareness and involvement. Judge Keller imposed contempt referrals, asset freezes, and warned of arrest if Trump doesn't comply. Legal experts say resignation is Trump's only way out. The DOJ faces pressure to indict, Republicans face pressure to break with Trump, and the 2026 political landscape just changed dramatically. Watch for Trump's response, DOJ actions, congressional hearings, Republican positioning, legal team changes, and polling. This represents a system of accountability functioning despite unprecedented challenges. Trump is facing the consequences of his actions. Democracy is proving it can hold even presidents accountable when evidence warrants it. This is history unfolding with stakes that couldn't be higher. Stay tuned.